Good evening, thanks for joining us. This is NTD Business, and I'm Paul Graney. Labour Department numbers show prices are rising faster than expected. We have details on the March CPI. A New York real estate developer is preparing to launch a cryptocurrency backed by gold. We ask one of the world's top currency experts if it'll work. And as the crypto market hits another record high, one Bitcoin exchange CEO warns of more regulatory crackdowns. That and much more coming up in NTD Business. U.S. consumer prices jumped by the most in nearly 9 years in March. Labour Department says the consumer price index rose by 0.6 percentage points, more than economists expected. Fueling that increase, a 9% rise in prices at the pump, gasoline accounting for nearly half of the index's increase. If you conveniently strip away the volatile food and energy components, also called core CPI, it leaves a 0.3% rise. Higher rents and vehicle insurance costs accounting for the increase. On a yearly basis, the department says prices are up 2.6%. You'll have heard many of our guests warning about inflation since the printing presses were really turned up last year at the beginning of the pandemic. One of them is Daniel Akaya, the chief economist at the Tressis hedge fund that manages $6 billion in assets. I asked him for his thoughts on today's numbers.
Once we look at the figures, the headline figures, they look rather normal, even logical for a recovery. But if we look at the things that we purchase on a day-to-day basis, the non-replicable goods, the things that we cannot just decide not to purchase, then we can understand that the average consumer in the United States is feeling the pinch of inflation in a way that is probably much larger than what many were expecting. And if we see, for example, the wage growth looks optically attractive. But if we look at the components of inflation that make up the true basket of the things that we purchase daily, we see that the wage growth is actually very, very insufficient compared to the rise in prices. Therefore, real disposable income is likely to suffer in the midterm.
We have some people saying it's like a K-shaped inflation, where it's hitting the lower end of the society, the lower income earners higher, more than the higher up. Do you think this is a fair assessment?
There are studies, a very good one by Professor Cavallo, that show that the weaker segments of the population, the lower classes, are suffering between 2 to 2.5 times higher inflation than what the average consumer price index figure shows. Why? Because the lower parts of the weaker and the poorer parts of the economy purchase more goods and services that are on the things that are basic needs, no? Food, energy, utilities, medical services, etc. And what is bringing inflation down in the CPI is basically hospitality, technology, etc. So obviously the impact for the poorest is quite more significant. Absolutely it is.
You mentioned it was higher than consensus predictions. You've been predicting inflation since we started to speak over a year ago, since we started this money printing. Are you expecting it to get even worse?
I think it will get worse before it gets better. We will see inflation moving back in the second half of the year because energy prices will moderate because of a few other factors. But I come back to the point that we have been saying for a while, is that the sticky part of inflation, the rise in the core goods and services that we purchase on a day-to-day basis, that is likely to remain elevated even into the end of the year. So this will be a year of two halves. The first half will see the base effect, massive increase in the in some components of the index, and in the second half there will be some moderation. However, come back to the point, I always look at inflation relative to what? Relative to the salaries and relative to the real disposable income and the job security of families. And even with that second part being a bit more moderated, we will still see a significant rise in prices for the important things that we buy on a daily basis that we need for our families and basically to survive.
Incredible. Daniel Akaya, Tressis, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Stocks were mostly higher today, with the S&P 500 closing at another record high. The Dow fell 68 points, 0.2%. S&P 500 gained 14 points, 0.33%. The Nasdaq added over 146 points, just over 1%. Johnson & Johnson shares, though, hit a one-month low before recovering some losses. Calls for pausing its vaccine after several people developed rare blood clots dealt it a fresh setback today. More on that in just a moment. First quarter earnings season begins in earnest on Wednesday. JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo reporting results, and Bank of America and Citigroup reporting on Thursday. Today, though, the 10-year Treasury yield fell to 1.62%. Gold up less than a percentage point, approaching $1,750 now. Oil and also gained about 1%. In Bitcoin news, just how high will that crypto fly? Bitcoin just had an all-time record of over $63,000. But the CEO of a top crypto exchange warns regulatory crackdowns could be around the corner. NTD's Phil Zhou reports.
The CEO of the fourth largest crypto exchange, Kraken, warns, "I think there could be some crackdown." The U.S. government recently proposed a new anti-money laundering law. It requires people who hold crypto in private digital wallets to undergo identity checks if the transaction is $3,000 or more. The Kraken CEO says that would hurt crypto, defeating crypto's original purpose, which was to offer financial services to everyone. He hopes the U.S. won't be short-sighted on crypto and praises other countries like the communist regime in China for taking a long-term view. But not everyone thinks crypto will be used for good, especially in China.
I think that the digital RMB is the largest threat to the world as it exists today.
In an earlier interview with NTD, Bass said if China's crypto project succeeds, it could be the Chinese regime's Trojan horse.
And I don't think that the digital RMB should be able to be distributed amongst democracies in the West. Period, full stop. That sounds hyperbolic, but if you just take time to think about it, it is their Trojan horse of all Trojan horses.
Bass says Chinese crypto will make it easier for the communist regime to censor and control people across the globe.
They'll know where you spend your money, how much you have. They will know all of your proclivities. And by the way, if you ever say anything negative about Tiananmen Square or Xinjiang or the Falun Gong or the Tibetans, guess what? Your social credit score just went down and they might turn your money off.
India is considering a new law that would ban cryptocurrencies, penalizing its citizens for holding or trading them. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
South Korea is also cracking down on the crypto market. Its government saying virtual currency is not a legal currency or financial investment product, and no one guarantees its value. But not everyone is worried about regulation. Kent Swig, one of the biggest real estate developers in New York City, just secured $6 billion to set up a cryptocurrency backed by gold. It's called DigAU. He said he got the idea after talking to his son about the new technology. If a cryptocurrency is backed by something like gold or the dollar, it's called a stable coin. At any moment, you can swap it for a fixed amount of the anchor money, an ounce of gold, for example. This is different from Bitcoin, that price changes depending on what people are willing to pay for it at any moment. I discussed the new coin with Steve H. Hankey. He's a professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University. He's also one of the world's leading currency experts. He's not a fan of Bitcoin, you'll hear why in just a moment, but he says crypto is the future. I asked him what he likes about it.
The feature that really appeals is the fact that it is a crypto is a private asset. Now, right now, all the cryptos, especially Bitcoin, are primarily just speculative assets. They're not currencies. If you actually did a currency board arrangement and set it up as a currency board, whatever the crypto was, it would become a currency, a private currency, and would be a substitute for, in many cases, a lousy currency created by a central bank. If you go to someplace like Argentina, the peso is junk. It would be great to have a private currency, crypto, that was circulating and freely available and had very low transaction costs and was usable. Now the problem is cryptos like Bitcoins have extremely high transactions costs, and the price of those cryptos is also very volatile. So they're not used in transactions. The fees, the transactions fees associated with using those are very, very high. That's why they're not used. It's not financially viable to be using those for transactions. If you had a currency board with low fees, no volatility, you'd have fixity in the exchange rate, so there'd be, by definition, no volatility with the anchor. The thing would work like a charm.
Do you predict that in the future we may see this more widespread as private currencies? Is this what your prediction is for the future?
I think if they are done properly, we'll see a much greater use of private currencies via crypto. If at present, given the current design of cryptos, they are not currencies. They are speculative assets, and they will remain in that sphere. It's speculative asset. In fact, I think we're seeing right now huge bubbles being blown. They haven't burst, but they're still, like all bubbles, they're growing, and like all bubbles, eventually they probably will burst. But if you did it right, that wouldn't be the case. You would actually create a currency, a cryptocurrency that was usable and cheap to use, and it would be widely used. And I think that is what's going to happen. There will be new competitors coming in the crypto space that push to the side these speculative assets, these cryptos that exist right now, and it'll be really currencies and used as currencies.
How far back into history would you need to go to see private currencies proliferating just like that?
Well, in the 19th century, there were lots of private currencies being issued. We had free banking, so banks were issuing their own money, and they did very well. And by the way, most of those banks ultimately, for the currencies that they were issuing, had a fallback factor, and the fallback was gold. In other words, they were issuing currencies, but those currencies were backed by gold.
Professor Steve A. Janke, Johns Hopkins University, thank you.
Thank you.
U.S. federal health agencies want to pause the use of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. Officials say 6 recipients developed a rare blood disorder. Frank Katamai reports.
The New York Times reported 1 woman died and a second in Nebraska has been hospitalized in critical condition. All 6 recipients were women between 18 and 48 years of age. The agency said an advisory committee to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will meet on Wednesday to review the cases, and the Food and Drug Administration will review the analysis. Both agencies said the adverse events appear to be extremely rare. J&J said it is working closely with regulators. The drug maker said no clear causal relationship had been established between the events and its vaccine. More than 6 million doses of Johnson & Johnson's one-shot vaccine have been administered in the U.S. The news sent J&J shares down in early trading Wednesday. The agency's move comes 1 week after European regulators said they found a possible link between AstraZeneca's vaccine and a rare blood clotting problem that had led to a small number of deaths. And just 4 days ago, the European Medicines Agency said it was reviewing rare blood clots in 4 people in the U.S. who had received J&J's vaccine.
One of California's largest counties plans to test a digital vaccine passport. It's set to launch later this month. NTD's Tom Ozimek has the details.
California's Orange County plans to launch a pilot program for digital CCP virus vaccine and testing passports. Orange County health officials said the vaccine passport trial will roll out sometime in April. It can be used to display proof of vaccination when taking part in activities like concerts, sporting events, schools, and travel. Details are scant about how the digital passport will work. But an Orange County health official said the county's existing Athena vaccine scheduling app could be modified to include a passport feature. The Athena app is being used to schedule vaccine appointments at the county's mass inoculation sites, including at Disneyland. The announcement comes amid controversy over vaccine passport-style systems. Civil liberties groups say vaccine passports could potentially violate Americans' privacy rights while denying key services to people who are not vaccinated. A number of Republican governors, including in Florida and Texas, have signed executive orders banning the use of vaccine passports. The Biden administration has said that it would not develop a federal vaccine passport system, but that it would formulate guidelines on their use, including around privacy. Tom Ozimek, NTD News.
Salesforce has a plan for vaccinated workers to return to the office, but not unvaccinated. It's one of the first major U.S. companies to welcome back vaccinated workers over those who haven't yet got the shot. It says vaccinated employees can volunteer to go back to the office at Salesforce San Francisco headquarters and other California offices. The company will provide on-site testing and require workers to take the test twice a week. There is growing debate over giving preference to people who've been vaccinated. A couple of concerns include privacy, discrimination. A group of Republican congressmen recently introduced the No Vaccine Passports Act. It would ban federal agencies from issuing any such documents. Salesforce did say it'll eventually welcome back unvaccinated workers, but until it does, employees who want to work from home can do so, at least through until December. And Southeast Asia's largest ride-hailing and food delivery firm, Grab Holdings, is set to announce a merger with U.S.-based Altimeter. The deal will value Grab at nearly $40 billion and lead to a public listing. Brian Wood reports.
Southeast Asia's ride-hailing and food delivery company Grab is set to announce a merger with U.S.-based Altimeter as early as Tuesday, in what will be the biggest blank check company deal ever. That's according to 3 Reuters sources that say Singapore-based Grab will be valued at nearly $40 billion in preparation for a public offering. Grab's agreement includes a $4 billion private investment in public equity from global investors like Fidelity International and Janus Henderson, the sources said. Grab declined to comment, and Silicon Valley-based Altimeter did not respond to a request for comment. The deal is a big win for the company's early backers in Japan and China, and a U.S. listing will give Grab extra value in its main market in Indonesia over its local rival, Gojek. Grab has yet to turn profitable, but it expects food delivery business to break even by the end of the year as consumers shift to online food delivery. With operations in 8 countries and hundreds of cities, Grab is already Southeast Asia's most valuable startup.
New York City taxi drivers need to buy medallions from the government in order to do their jobs, otherwise they can't drive. But now drivers are suing the government, saying it artificially inflated medallion prices as Uber and Lyft really devastated their industry. NTD's Colin Fredrickson reports.
2 taxi drivers have filed a $2.56 billion lawsuit, accusing New York City officials of artificially inflating the value of its taxi medallions by fraudulent, collusive, and deceptive means in order to maximize its own profits. State Senator Tim Kennedy discussed the situation last month.
New York City medallions were worth, in the past, over $1 million. Today, many of those are valued at under $200,000, leaving these medallion owners, who are often immigrants with hefty debt that they can't repay.
The medallions give drivers the right to pick up customers. Former president and current spokesman of the New York State Federation of Taxi Drivers, Fernando Mateo, applauds the suit.
So the person who sold it to them should take them back and give them their money back and sell them at today's price. That's what's fair.
The plaintiffs claim New York City earned approximately $855 million from high-priced medallion sales, knowing full well that Uber and Lyft made them far less valuable.
Drivers can't afford to lose their livelihood, to lose everything that they've saved in their life for and everything that they've worked for. So shame on New York City for taking the cab drivers on a ride.
Mayor de Blasio has taken action to address the situation, setting up a relief fund and giving out $20,000 loans.
So they can end up in a better situation for their future and for their family's future.
Mateo, who is running for mayor, says this is not enough.
It's a slap in the face to hear what he is offering these drivers. It's adding insult to injury. You don't do that. If I am mayor, when I am mayor, I will make sure that these drivers get their money back.
The plaintiff's lawyer says the city owes Medallion owners 3 times the $855 million revenue, according to federal racketeering law. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Egyptian authorities have seized the massive cargo ship that blocked the Suez Canal last month. They say they won't let it go until the ship's owner pays $900 million. A state-run news outlet reports an Egyptian court ordered the Ever Given to pay. It's for losses inflicted when it blocked all traffic through the canal. More than 400 ships were blocked after the ship ran aground. After 6 days, it was dislodged and moved for repairs and investigation. About 20,000 containers in the ship will also be seized until the dispute is resolved. The Japanese company that owns the ship says insurance firms and lawyers are working on the compensation now, but have refused to comment further. Still to come. Nike wants your lightly worn shoes. Find out what they plan to do with them and why. And the Big Apple may not seem like the best home for bees, but rooftop gardens there tell a very different story. That and more after a short break. Change your mind on some Nike sneakers recently? Well, you might be able to give them back. On Monday, Nike announced it's accepting newly bought shoes that have been gently worn or have a manufacturing flaw. Shoes have to be returned within a 60-day window from the date of purchase. The company will then clean, fix them up, and resell them at select stores at bargain prices. 8 Nike stores in the U.S. are selling the refurbished shoes, but there are plans to sell them at 15 locations by the end of April. The company says it started the Resell program to reduce its waste footprint. Nike also says some of the returned shoes will be donated and that others are beyond repair will be recycled. Bustling New York City may not seem like the best place to house bees, but its high-rise rooftops and tiny gardens are actually buzzing with honeymakers. NTD's Arian Pastar has the story.
Nearly 2.5 million Italian honeybees have arrived in New York City. They waited in a white van to be picked up to their new homes early Friday. The founder of Honey Farm, Andrews Honey, drove up from Georgia to deliver the bees.
There's about 12,000 per box. Bees are sold by weight, you know, like cheese.
Some buyers stuffed the packages into bags, while one strapped 2 boxes of bees to his bicycle. With it, he transported them to his hive on the Lower East Side.
I'm always doing my work and getting around by bike. So sometimes I think of it as I'm training to be Danish.
Many hives in the city are now found on the rooftops of skyscrapers and office buildings. New York legalized beekeeping in 2010 and has hundreds of registered hives.
Here in the city, just it connects it, much more, to me. And to let people know that, yeah, there's beekeepers in the city. I've heard, but this is the first time that I've actually seen so many other beekeepers.
Bee populations are in sharp decline worldwide. It's partly because excessive pesticides and chemicals in rural areas and a lack of crop variety. But New York doesn't have this problem, making it a healthy habitat for the insects.
You need pollinators. A third of what you put in your mouth needs a pollinator. So it's important for pollinators to be prevalent in the environment. And in this city, believe it or not, bees do well because there's less pesticides generally.
He added that those who live close to farms have to fight the pesticides. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
As the latest business updates for today, you can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.